So now we'd love to re-invite to the stage our director, Alysa Nahmias, and of course, our subjects, Mr. Jared Owens, Gilberto Rivera, Russell Craig, and of course, Mr. Jesse Krimes. So what we'll do is I'll ask a couple questions, open up to the audience, but if you'd love to address the audience, I'd love for you to go ahead.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I just want to acknowledge, I can't see very well up here, but there are folks who worked on this film. My producer, Ben Murray, is here. Thank you, Ben. He shot some of the film. I might start to cry. Molly Schwartz, are you here? Hi, Molly. Will you come up here with us, please? Molly's our animator. I haven't seen her since before the pandemic. Kristen Newteal is here, one of our editors. Hi, Kristen. Thank you. I don't even know who else is here. Kenyatta's here. Kenyatta, will you come up here? Kenyatta is one of the musicians who performed from Musicambia on the score.
Please come up to the
Thank
stage.
you. Julie Courtney's here. Thank you, Julie. I'm forgetting people, but I also just want to say a big thank you, and I want to let the Q&A get started. Hey. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Okay.
So this is a simple question, but a little bit of a twist. Everyone asks how you start the story. How did you guys get started on this journey? But not only how did you start it, but how did you continue it? This was a long process, a long journey, a lot of interviews, a lot of back and forth and touching base over many years. Can you just take us through that process and how you felt at various points in that journey? Did you want to stop? Did you want to continue?
Oh, I definitely wanted to stop.
There were moments. I was going to say it was Operation Don't Let Jesse Give Up on This. But you guys kept him in it, right? I think, it was, for me, discovering Jesse through his artwork. And I read a blog called Prison Photography that had posted about his work, an apocalyptine, and a little bit about the story, and I reached out. And we just started a series of conversations, shared our artwork, like I shared my films with you, and had a conversation about what it would be like to tell your story and why you might want to do that. And I think what we kept coming back to when it was challenging to have cameras around or be sharing.
She
stuff.
initially told me it was going to be a year or two.
I tricked him.
That turned into 8.
Beware. Yeah. But yeah, I think was the reason you did it, right? Which was to share your story in hopes that it would help others. And that motivated both of us to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the time, particularly when I just came home from prison, people talking about mass incarceration wasn't in the popular lexicon like it is today. And so it felt like very important to try to use the artwork and the story to really try to highlight everybody else who has been through the system, and how do we make this a very visible issue so that people actually start to care about it, and then we can use our artwork to try and change hearts and minds and use that towards narrative change.
Very well said. How would you suggest, because it's something you said about people thinking you're just a prison artist or whatnot, how would you suggest that people in the greater world support you guys as artists? What would you want people out there to do to recognize your work? How could people do better to support artists like yourselves? And this is for the group as well, if anybody wants to chime in.
Just come see the work if you want to support it. We're some of us represented, some of us aren't, but we all have studio space. Just look us up. Instagram is the best way, and just shoot us a DM. And if you want to swing through the studio, let us know ahead of time. We'll definitely make space for you.
I would say briefly spread the words about the film Krimes, because it really shows you the journey of an artist, no matter where you're coming from. If you're truly an artist, you're an artist. So that takes us out of that classification of just being prison artists. But this is a great example, and I was glad to be a part of it.
You want to say something about
Culminated, which is, artists, no matter where you're from, you know what I'm saying? Artist culture, artists, it's everywhere, right? So no matter where you develop your skills at, or whatever, it's art, man. And you gotta support it, man. It's beyond just being in prison. I told myself in prison. That was the time that I was still, and I was like, I need something to occupy my mind, because I can't be idle, right? So art. And art is a vehicle, man. The book says the day. And he was like the lax one, right? He was like, yo, we want to get us up in there. And we up there, yo.
So this is my last question, so please get your brains together for questions.
And I will.
Wait, no, go ahead, please.
I just want to add one thing on. So, like, I also think it's really important, too, is, like, you know, the distinction, like what Kano was saying, is, like, making a distinction between prison artists versus artists. Like, there is no distinction. You know, it's like saying an artist is an outsider artist versus an art world, and it's like, there's no distinction. It's like a ridiculous classification. Just based off of, like, people's training or where they make work. But the other thing is, like, so since we've come home, like, me and Craig have co-founded the Rate of Return Fellowship, and so, like, it's specifically designed to support formerly incarcerated artists, and it was the first fellowship of its kind. And so I think, like, you know, supporting Rate of Return is one thing, amplifying Rate of Return will also go a long way, and even replicating it. Like, how do other organizations in different communities across the country design systems and structures that are specifically built to help amplify people who have, like, lost decades of time and are kind of starting behind the eight ball. So it's like what we need as artists is slightly different from what other artists may need. And so, like, that's what Rate of Return is kind of designed to do, is to create like a pipeline into the art world and offer that kind of practice sustainability and networking and community support as well.
Very well said. Alysa, the work, right? The work is all through the film. It's animated, it's moving, it's beautiful, it's shown. What was the plan of the approach to show Jesse's work, to show everyone on this stage's work in the film? How did you want to make that happen?
Thanks. Also, I remember who I forgot. Marie Hinson, our cinematographer. Thank you so much. If you want to come up, please do. Amazing, beautiful work. Speaking of work and visuals, so and I probably forgot someone else too. So the artwork, yeah. Jesse and I originally, I think the other thing that made you agree to do this was, like, we were going to lead with the art. It's not a prison film, right? It's not. That's not the point. The point is the art, and the point is that art is, you know, it's a human right. Like, it's something that is a basic need, and something that connects us and unites us, and that transcends all kinds of artificial divisions, and can do that. So we wanted to really make that come alive in the film, and the concept for the animation was that we would be inside of Jesse's perspective as an artist, like his POV, very kind of first person, but not just what he saw, but what he felt, and sort of the emotional experience of being an artist in that kind of space that would allow us to see, like, impossible views of prison that you couldn't shoot with a camera. And so Jesse and Molly and I met several times. Molly started working on the project also a long time ago and has persevered with us. Thank you. And, you know, Jesse shared, like, some of the first questions we asked, besides sort of details of, like, well, how did you cut things? Like, what did that look like? How'd you make the tool? Molly asked some great questions about that, but also, you know, what were some of the artists that he felt expressed, like, captured some of the aesthetic or the kind of emotional aesthetic of what he felt like inside and while he was incarcerated and while he was making art. So like William Kentridge was one artist that we looked at. So we started to kind of look at visual comps, and then Molly, the first animation that we made was the Purgatory series, when he's cutting the soap and peeling, and you see those views, like the plan views. I'm an architect turned filmmaker, so we also kind of thought about prison in interesting, I think, ways. And then the artwork itself, it was just filming it continuously, filming you making it, and getting high-res images of the artwork, and then obviously some of the exhibitions, like the Paris, Palais de Tokyo shots of the work in situ. So, do you want to say anything else about it? Yeah,
Well,
and these guys work too. Oh my gosh, like getting archival photographs of your work from, you know, from inside, but also the new stuff you were doing, and you're allowing us into the studio was crucial to being able to tell the story. Thank you.
Well, are there any questions out there in the audience? Yes, right here in the front. Just don't. It's okay. We can hear her. No, you can just. Oh, okay.
Hi. My name is Mai. This is wonderful. You know.
Oh, hey, Mai.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
This is wonderful. I appreciate just seeing the film, learning your story. Congratulations on your trajectory, all of you. Being the sister of like an ex-offender, I really appreciate seeing like restorative justice type, you know, mass incarceration stories. And I have to admit that at first I was like, no offense, this is politically incorrect. I don't know if I want to see the story of a white boy coming out of prison, you know, because you always hear about, not hear about, you always know that like people of color slash black people are you like more incarcerated, I guess. But then I had to sit back and just find the humanity, you know, of the story. And like at one point, you're like 1 in 3 people, you know, have been incarcerated and or will be. And so it became like, okay, soften your heart and look at the story and look how wonderful and masterful like your life has emerged in the last 8 years. So that's just a congratulatory statement. But my question is, because I feel like I didn't see this in the film, your real name is Krimes, correct? Like that's your surname. And I just was like, yo, the irony, like this guy, his name is Krimes, like that's not his hip hop name, that's not his like his rapper name, that's not his IG, like that's his name. But I didn't hear like discourse or discussion about it in the film. So like, can you just talk about like just this, I don't know, this wonderful, you know, like your name is Krimes, you went to prison, and like people go to prison for crimes, and I'm not gonna over-explain it.
Thank you, Mai.
Very well said.
Yeah, I don't even know how to respond to that. Yeah, no, it's, you know, born with the name. And I guess at some point, though, like names actually mean something. Like I think, you know, at some point in my life, having the name Krimes, like, and going through some of the things that I experienced early on, I don't know, I guess it did kind of like create some kind of alternate identity in my head of like, I am a criminal, like this is who I am, and like this is who I'm going to be. And so that name did play a part into it early on. And then, you know, I've also heard like every bad prison joke possible going through that system. But you know, again, it's just my name. So, but I think everyone else has like a great nickname. But in prison, I just had my name, which is kind of boring. Yeah.
True story. When I first met him, I walked into the office at Hospital Bubble with Layton, and I walked in and he said, literally, his words exactly right. There's some white boy in here. He says he's an artist. Go check him out. I said, okay, what's his name? He said, Krimes. I was walking out. I said, what? Because he like to tell jokes all the time. So I was like, I think he had your ID because he was using it, and he showed me your ID and it said Krimes. I was like, oh shit! I said, his name is really Krimes. That's super cool. And when I walked in, I introduced myself, and I was like, he told me, and I was like, that's you didn't change your name? He said, no, it's my name. I'm German. I was like, okay, cool.
It's hilarious. Any other questions? Yeah, here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing to do because like the barriers that are up against employment and housing and all of those things, I mean, they vary like state to state. And so it's like you need advocates, and like that's part of what Right of Return does as well, is like we partner our artists with advocacy organizations to help organize and like change narratives in support of people who are like leading initiatives. And so like I don't know exactly how to go about that, but I trust the advocates to be able to do that and our artists to try and amplify that. But it is a very complicated thing to try to accomplish because it's just so drastic across the country. And like the other part, and kind of like going back even to like thinking about what you were saying about race and like coming to watch like the narrative of mass incarceration being about, like from my point of view, right, from as a white man. And it's like the thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about or like understand is that when we like perpetuate narratives of mass incarceration only from the perspective of black and brown people, it actually ends up reiterating very damaging and kind of negative stereotypes. And so it's like, and we also have to understand that like New York City has been decarcerating, right? And Philadelphia and a lot of like major places across the country. but mass incarceration is actually growing exponentially in small cities and rural parts of the country, like all over the United States. And so like when we create narratives that are an only narrative, rather like all kind of encompassing narrative, it allows people, or it like blocks off the possibility for people to kind of come into this and own it. Like, this is all of our issues, right? Like, we all have a stake in ending mass incarceration. And so like the part of the power of this film, I think, and like why I also agreed to do it, is that, you know, we need to be talking to audiences all over the country. Like, we can't be siloed, and like we have to form multiracial collectives and initiatives to end mass incarceration. And so like that's kind of why I thought this film could be powerful, because like, you know, other places in the country, racial disparities are worse, like far worse than major urban areas. And women's incarceration is rising, and they're building bigger and newer jails and prisons. And so it's like, while we may win in New York, we're losing in Indiana and Oklahoma and all over the country. And it's like, you know, we win some, but then we lose twice as much. And so how do we actually create a unified front? And so that's why I thought like this story kind of has some power to address that, or at least create the space for people to kind of come into the issue. And so like after like doing the screening like in Indiana and Denver, like you'd be just shocked how many people come up to me after the film and tell me that they've been incarcerated, or their son's incarcerated, or their grandson's incarcerated, but like they never talk about it. Like the conversations aren't necessarily being had in the same ways. And so like that's part of also like how I think we begin to change the culture and the narrative, and also how we begin to hold political leaders accountable when we vote them out of office. And so like that's kind of like a double.
Very, very well said, Jesse. I would love to give you guys the last word to say about the film for the audience before we go. So anything else you wanted to add lastly?
I would say that the film is 100% real. I was there. Because there's a lot of stuff out there that got a lot of cap with it and things like that. Cap mean like it's not real, or a little spice beyond stuff. It's all authentic, and I'm very, very fortunate to be a part of it. Alysa, you are a genius. She believed in Jesse from an article she's seen of him, like in the beginning, way in the beginning. Like that was really years and years of like films and things like that, and it's like, it's mind blowing. Like I'll never get tired. I'm like watching the movie with my popcorn, like I'm seeing it like 10 times, but it's like, I can't believe this is happening, because there's a lot of stuff that we got going on or whatever, and we trying our best as Right of Return and our comrades and things to try to make opportunities for people that's incarcerated and things like that, but we only us, so we need to grow and things like that, and that's the plan. But it's official, and I'm so like glad that this got out here. I told you, I'm like, I be knowing stuff, and I tell them, and then it happened.
He
So,
did.
words.
He predicted a lot of this stuff.
I do it a lot, but like it's good that it all, and it's just beautiful, and I'm like so blessed to be a part of it.
Thank you guys so much. We would love. Go ahead.
When Jesse said we got to build collective, right? It's touching all races, all people, right? That's how we got to think about it, right? Because if we don't think about it like that, we ain't gonna fix it. You know, we sending all these kids to prison, all the programs. A lot of people think prison is college, free college is this. All of that's going away. All those programs are going out the door. So they're going to prison and being idle, and watching TV, and just with nothing to do. And then they come out with no education, no trade. Where are they going to work at after 20 years? Where are you going to go? Right? And that's a problem, too. I understand some people got to go to prison, I guess, right? But then you're not educating them, you're not teaching them a different way. What you respect. You know? And you deal with politicians, you in some organizations, that's the conversation to be had. You got to educate these people, you got to give them training. They spoke about it in the Bible. Remember that story with the fish?
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. the team from Krimes. It's just been
Thank
a
you
pleasure.
so much.
Thank you, Alysa.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Doc NYC. Thanks, everyone.